Good afternoon and welcome to today's Westpac address here at the National Press Club. I'm Greg Jennett, Director here at the club, and our guest today is John Grimes from the Smart Energy Council. John's topic today will address power politics, the political power of Australia's renewable energy industry. It's worth observing as we introduce John to the club that the Smart Energy Council, for those who aren't familiar, has more than 1,000 members drawn from household renewables sector, that would be suppliers and installers, batteries and the like, all the way up to large-scale renewable providers, storage operators and the like. He's been doing this job for 17 years, and I guess in light of the recent election, in theory, it was meant to have put to rest some aspects of the policy debate, the very vigorous policy debate that we call sometimes the climate wars in this country. But somehow history tells us, and John might address this in his remarks, that that almost certainly won't be the case. Aspects of this will probably rage on for some time. So John's going to reflect on some of these issues in today's Westpac National Press Club address, and we'll welcome John Grimes now to the podium.
Well, I'd like to start today by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people. And of course, this week is NAIDOC week. So a very special shout out to my wonderful niece, Kira Grimes. Kira is a proud Yamaji and Bunaba woman from the desert country around Fitzroy Crossing and Brew. And her three beautiful children, Kai, Malu, and Winthali. The kids love NAIDOC week, and a big shout out to you on this special week. They are, of course, the next generation. Well, Greg, it's a great honour to be here at the National Press Club on the eve of the 48th Parliament of Australia, a parliament with a mandate for rapid decarbonisation. Apt because my message today is this: renewable energy is the key to our national prosperity and to our economic security. So, who are the Smart Energy Council? Well, we trace our history back to 1954. Engineers at CSIRO, shirts off, in their shorts, working in the Australian sun, inventing the solar hot water technology that's used around the world today, who went on to form what is now the Smart Energy Council. In the 1970s, people like Monica Oliphant AO joined the organisation, someone who was instrumental in laying the foundation for South Australia's remarkable 75% renewable grid. Shortly, by 2027, a 100% renewable grid, one of our longest serving members. And I'm so proud that Monica is here with us today, Monica Oliphant. Well, today, the Smart Energy Council represents the multi-billion-dollar firms that invest in the transition. The big developers building wind, solar and big batteries right across the grid. The hydropower. We represent the renewable ammonia industry, the green iron industry, the green aluminium industry, lithium, vanadium, turning critical minerals into megawatts and mega profits. We represent Australia's smart transport industry, electric vehicles as batteries on wheels, renewables in agriculture to feed the world. In the energy sector, transmission engineers are like our Top Gun pilots, sunglasses on, going for glory. But there is another force at work in our industry, and it is the tradies army. These are the thousands of solar and battery installers across the country running cables in ceilings one roof at a time. That army has changed Australia. 1 in 3 homes now has solar on their roof. An astounding 4 million solar homes right across the country. That's right, tonight almost 10 million Australians will go to sleep under a solar roof. Now, everybody knows the one thing you can do to slash your power bills is to install solar. And now, thanks to the federal government's Cheaper Home Batteries program, get a battery in your garage as well. Store that free solar in the middle of the day when you're out and about. Use it at night to do the dishes, cook dinner. Store the sun to save a ton. A community-led people's revolution. The further you live from a central post office in your state capital, the more likely you are to have solar on your roof. Power bills don't matter all that much to the rich, but in the mortgage belt, in rural and regional Australia, people are doing it tough. Every dollar counts. Slash 60% off your power bill with solar, and 90% or more by adding a solar battery. That's why, in part, places like Blacktown have 10 times more solar than Bondi. People really love solar because it saves them money. It's a uniquely Australian approach. Successive Australian governments have focused on households, kicked off by Prime Minister John Howard. Today, we have the most efficient, safe, and cost-effective rooftop solar sector in the world. Rooftop solar in the US costs over 3 times more. And countries are lining up to learn from the Australian experience. Countries like India, and a big shout out to the Indian High Commission here today, who are partway through the rollout of 10 million solar homes in India, solar rooftops, a fantastic achievement. Well, let me turn to the economics of renewables. Way back in 1992, Bill Clinton coined the phrase, "It's the economy, stupid." Well, today, when it comes to renewables, it's economic stupid. In 1977, how much did a watt of solar capacity cost? $76 US. Today, it's 10 US cents. It took the world 68 years to install the first terawatt of solar PV. That's about 650 million solar panels. And the second terawatt, just over 2 years. Before 2030, we'll be doing that globally every single year. In May this year, China installed 119 gigawatts of renewable energy. Hold up a sec. Let's put that in context, all right? Well, Australia installed just over 7 gigawatts of renewable energy last year. China, 119 gigawatts in a single month. Australia, 7 gigawatts in an entire year. So if you round it out, it means that in China, they installed in 2 days in May, more renewable energy than Australia installed last year. And China keeps accelerating. No wonder China's national emissions peaked in March 2024. And since then, falling. 6 years ahead of the Paris target. 6 years early. Today, renewables deliver around 40% of all of the electricity in China. And then there's India, the world's biggest population. And more good news. The Prime Minister Modi's target of 50 gigawatts a year, done. 500 gigawatts of clean energy by 2030. 200 gigawatts already deployed. But we're told in Australia that these countries make change in Australia futile. That actually both China and India have highly ambitious national plans. You see, China foresaw the trillion-dollar transfer of wealth underway from the fossil fuel sector to the renewable energy sector decades ago. Today, China manufactures 70% of the world's EVs, over 75% of the batteries, 80% of the solar panels. I've just got back from the world's biggest trade show. It's a renewable energy trade show held in Shanghai. And get this, 500,000 people turn up from around the world every year for the show. It is the entire population of the ACT going to a single smart energy event. Here's a fun fact. Pick a solar panel up anywhere in the world. A staggering 92% of the intellectual property that makes up that solar panel was invented right here in Australia, mostly at the University of New South Wales. Now, almost unknown at home, globally recognised as the climate and industry heroes they are. That show, the 500,000 people, a direct line from our researchers to them. Unbelievable. Actually, the truth is this. Australian solar innovation paired with Chinese manufacturing at scale is actually the thing that is giving the world even a fighting chance when it comes to combating dangerous climate change. I again saw firsthand how Professor Martin Green and the team at UNSW were venerated. They should be Nobel Prize winners. National heroes. Him, Renata Egan, Andrew Blakers, on Australian postage stamps. And how about that cohort of young Chinese solar pioneers, completing PhDs in Sydney in the 1980s, taking a risk, having a go, from startup companies to some of the world's biggest. Take the solar, battery and EV company BYD. You might have seen the cars, the build your dream cars popping up on the streets. Well, last year, that company had revenues of $160 billion, more than twice the revenue of BHP, the big Australian. But the world can't leave it to China alone, and Australia must also diversify. India, Indonesia, Japan, Korea, Europe, Brazil, build itself into the manufacturing supply chains around the world, build its research links globally. Now, Bloomberg New Energy Finance tells us that the world spent $2.1 trillion on the energy transition last year. Almost half of that was spent in the Asia Pacific alone, our region, our home. But not everyone is leaning into the transition. Now, just think about this. Imagine the transition as a marathon race. The best runners run a marathon in a little over 2 hours. And so if the multi-trillion dollar transition of the world were a marathon race, then countries like Australia and Japan, the US, would be like the runners at the start line, limbering up, getting their numbers. But the only problem was that race began an hour ago. That's how far ahead China is in this race. Now, for a brief moment, it looked like the US would put themselves in contention for a podium finish. The Biden administration's Inflation Reduction Act, unlocking $1 trillion in investment. Then on Friday, the 4th of July, President Trump signed his big, beautiful bill. Now, I'll leave it to Elon Musk to critique. I want to travel to the US one day. It gives handouts to industries of the past while severely damaging industries of the future. Hear, hear, Elon Musk. It is an effective US surrender out of the energy transformation race. And actually, that's really bad news, bad for the entire world. Clean energy is not just a climate policy, it's an industrial strategy, a productivity strategy. Now, the good news is that Australia is doing well, punching above our weight. 12 years ago, 10% of our electricity was renewable. Today, we're at 41%. Remember, China's at 40. Extraordinary size of their economy. But in Australia, we produce enough from renewables to power around 1.5 times the electricity demand of every household in the country. And Australia wins a gold medal, the most solar energy produced per person on a per capita basis, on track to meet and beat our targets by unlocking big renewables, large scale, and bottom-up community-led renewables. That tradies army, electrifying thousands of houses a day. The Cheaper Home Batteries program is a game changer. Put solar and battery on one home, doesn't do that much. But 6 million homes moves the dial off the chart. Soaking up the sun, discharging on demand. Battery inquiries are up a staggering 400%. Now, the market reacts fast, and so does our industry. Now, as a nation, we have a staggering national advantage. You see, if you put a solar panel in Australia and the exact same solar panel in Germany, get this, the one in Australia will produce up to 4 times more energy than the one in Germany. Same panel, much stronger sun, depending a bit where it is. The solar panel costs the same, but the economic return is 4 times greater. Turns out, Greg, that we are the sunburnt country after all. Who knew? And not just solar. We have some of the world's best wind. Have you ever seen those coastlines where the trees actually grow sideways because of the unrelenting force of the wind? Well, they are along the coast in Western Australia. They're in parts of Tasmania. The roaring 40s whistling from Antarctica up into Victoria. We have everything we need. The land, the critical minerals, the amazing smart people. Today, our major export to the world is iron ore. We dig it up and send a conga line of ships to China, Japan, and Korea. The red dirt of the Pilbara spread out as a thin line across the South China Sea. Iron ore makes steel. You put iron ore in a massive furnace and blast it with energy. When you're done, only about 2% remains, iron pellets. This is the most energy intensive part of the steel making process. So here's an idea. Take the world's cheapest renewable energy in places like South Australia, Western Australia, Queensland, process the suitable ore right here. There are electric furnaces being developed right now. People like BlueScope Steel involved in that work. Now, that would mean that we're no longer shipping the 98% of the waste, right, the dirt overseas. Fewer ships, much more valuable cargo. Zero carbon iron pellets. To turn the EVs being made and shipped to the world, produce them with zero carbon iron from Australia. That would be a nation building program to reindustrialise our economy. Suddenly, an Australian economy highly relevant in a decarbonising world, creating well-paying jobs in our regions. And we have to go to work, adding value to and processing not just iron ore, but all of our critical minerals, wherever it makes sense. Aluminium, rare earths, lithium, and much more. The opportunity is huge. And I'd like to acknowledge Professor Frank Yotzo from the Australian National University, also here today. Researchers at the ANU are hard at work, creating a blueprint for Australia to do just that. Frank. But friends, not all of our political leaders share the same vision. I've been the Chief Executive of the Smart Energy Council for 17 years, and it's been a shocking thing to watch. Being anti-renewables is a defining ideological test of allegiance for the coalition. Strangely Trumpian in a world before Trump the politician. Going all in on an economic and engineering lie. A lie that sits at the heart of the not-so-secret coalition agreement between the Liberal and National parties. That renewables can't compete, that they're too weak, too unreliable. That adherence, that belief gets you in, and it keeps you in. Break ranks, you're done for. Peter Dutton, in his budget reply speech, said that this election would be a sliding doors moment. We agreed, because it was. To think in modern Australia, the coalition's election agenda included these staggering promises. Axe the $2.3 billion cheaper home battery program. Scrap new vehicle efficiency standards. Kill the $25 billion Future Made in Australia program. Abandon the $19 billion Rewiring the Nation initiative. Shut down the Net Zero Economy Agency. Take away the tax breaks for electric vehicles. Cancel production tax credits for clean hydrogen and critical minerals. And either follow Trump out of the Paris Agreement or scrap the targets in breach of it. No support for solar, no plan for families, but plenty for the coal and gas industry. Just as there's a through line, a direct link from those young Chinese researchers in Sydney to that multi-trillion-dollar industry, there's another through line from big fossil fuel interests to the biggest political mess of our time. But the coalition did have one big, bold plan: a nuclear-powered Australia. Ted O'Brien and Peter Dutton announced their nuclear plan in June last year. Well, they announced it well before, but they kept not telling us anything. And by June, they told us, they revealed the plan. Finally, we thought, the detail Australia craved. 7 taxpayer-funded nuclear sites across 5 states. But sadly, no costings, no detail. Maybe 2 reactors at each site? Maybe. The coalition's main message: renewables can't run a modern economy. Well, at least that was on brand. Anyway, the Smart Energy Council decided to take a closer look. The nuclear track record globally is not good. When you build a solar panel or a battery, you build them in the millions. They get cheaper the more you build. But with every single nuclear reactor, it's built from scratch. It's a bespoke engineering experiment. We looked at projects like Hinkley C in the UK, a single nuclear reactor site, an eye-watering $90 billion cost. Our team and stakeholders took the scant detail and ran the numbers. We put the plan at between $116 to $600 billion just to build. But it turns out, folks, that we were way too conservative. You see, the Australian coal fleet was built in the 60s, 70s and 80s. Today, that coal fleet is breaking down, literally blowing up. Coal-fired power stations close almost every year. According to the Australian Energy Market Operator, coal is all gone by 2038, 90% gone by 2034-35. But the coalition's nuclear plan needed the entire coal fleet to stay in place until nuclear was built. Up to $600 billion does not include the rebuild of the entire existing national coal fleet to keep it running, or the cost of the coal to burn to create the electricity. We never costed the compulsory acquisition of land, the state government subsidies, the cost of water for cooling, or even where the water was going to come from. The impact on emergency planning zones, or the cost of storing the nuclear waste for hundreds, maybe thousands of years. Much later, the leading economic analysts at Climate Energy Finance released the full costings, capturing it all. They put the cost of the nuclear plan, the entire cost to the Australian economy, at between $4.3 and $5.2 trillion. So how did the $600 billion compare with the coalition's numbers? Well, there were none. They wouldn't come for another 6 months, not until December last year. And when they did come, Greg, you could drive an electric truck through them. We didn't lie, we warned, and we were right to. The alternate government, proposing 7 nuclear sites without costings, the responsible thing, sound the alarm. It was always a 2-pronged attack: to attack renewables on one side and to back nuclear on the other, to keep coal and gas in the system for as long as possible. And it united Australians like never before. Self-funded retirees, young families, people across every demographic and geography. Forget ideology. Australians love solar. And I have no idea why the coalition would attack Australia's fastest growing industry. 50,000 workers powering every sector of the economy, backed by 10 million Australians with solar. Now, I can't change the past, but the question that I have, and I'm sure you have as well, is where is the coalition going to land on energy policy today? Well, the best outcome for Australia and for our industry is clear. A coalition that accepts the science, the economics, and the engineering, that backs the national interest. that joins in building a clean and affordable energy future. And if they do, they can count on our support. Because today, the federal coalition is facing its own sliding doors moment on gender, on demographics, and above all, on energy. Now, I really hope that common sense prevails. Too long in the making. For the Smart Energy Council, it's always been about policy, not politics. Now, don't get me wrong, we're not naive. The coalition has been coming after our industry since 2013 to abolish the renewable energy target, ARENA that funds all of the renewables innovation, CFC, the Green Bank that unlocks all of those big projects, and on and on. To destroy our industry, Australia's gains. We'll stand with anyone who has the best interests of our industry and the planet at heart. Like we stood with Premier Berejiklian and Matt Keane in New South Wales, the Liberal Marshall government in South Australia, and with Clive Palmer when the Palmer United Party blocked the coalition's plans in the Senate. And we took on and opposed the Victorian Labor government over their failed state rebate scheme. Then we helped them fix it. During the Albanese government's first term, we helped deliver the Capacity Investment Scheme, the Cheaper Home Batteries program. The Smart Energy Council was central in informing the future Made in Australia policy, and much more. And I want to take the opportunity to give a big shout out to Minister for Climate Change and Energy, Chris Bowen, a highly effective minister. He makes up his own mind, but arguably the most effective minister in Cabinet for his portfolio. And I want to acknowledge the leadership of Prime Minister Albanese. The Prime Minister clearly wants to see the world and see Australia succeed in a world that's changing. He's committed to setting up Australia for generational success. He believed in it enough to fight an election on the issue. Good on him. Good on Labor. And good on the Greens and the Teal Independents and those in the coalition who back net zero and renewables. And good on you, the people of Australia, for backing our industry in record numbers. But we do need much more action and speed. The 1980s brought bold, necessary reforms that modernised the Australian economy. Today's challenge, how do we thrive in a rapidly decarbonising world? But to do that, it'll take the same political ambition, the same political courage, the same reforming zeal of the Hawke and Keating governments. That's why it was great to hear Treasurer Jim Chalmers' speech here at the National Press Club, setting a reform agenda built around productivity. And there's nothing more central to productivity than energy. Clean energy drives productivity. Abundant, cheap, reliable power. Energy fuels everything in the economy. Full stop. But to realise our renewable energy potential, we need urgent reform. If we do not, Australia risks becoming the Kodak economy of the future. A really big deal one day and gone the next, all because it refused to change. We need to speed up the rollout on our grid, to smash the connection delays, to fix outdated planning and environmental laws. Energy market rules built for a fossil fuel past. It's time to put people at the centre of the energy market, not the big fossil fuel companies. And it's also important that we call out the gas lobbyists peddling disinformation. Natural gas is not renewable. Let's call what we pump into our homes and businesses by its real name: methane gas, a potent greenhouse gas, second only to carbon dioxide in impact. Simply put, gas is a gamble. And it's time to get the money out the door. Take the National Reconstruction Fund, a $15 billion fund to transform Australia's industry and economy. So far, just, might be less, $500 million allocated. That's not nearly fast enough. Building a circular economy is also central in productivity reform. Australia's biggest silver mine lies on the roofs of Australian households. And we've got businesses in the room today, John, I see you over there, that can take a solar panel, recycle it, and recover 99% of all of the value in that solar panel. This is once again Australian solar innovation leading the world. But it is an industry at risk of imminent collapse. We are in desperate need of a mandated national solar and battery stewardship scheme. Solar panels must not go to landfill. They must be recycled, and batteries too. And we need a powerful new emissions reduction target for 2035 to reduce emissions in the high 70% range. A powerful target consistent with the science, and to send a powerful message to industry that it's time to invest. To keep up with the global leaders in Europe and elsewhere. From green iron to solar recycling and everything in between. Australia has such an extraordinary story to tell. Now, after the Olympics and the World Cup, the COP is the world's third largest event, the Global Climate and Business Trade Show. COP 2031 in Adelaide in November 2026, an opportunity for South Australian Power Networks, a valued member of the Smart Energy Council, to share how it manages the grid, sometimes powered by 100% rooftop solar alone. Forget the big solar farms, rooftop solar alone. And here's a spoiler alert, in South Australia, it's easily managed. Let's work together with the Pacific to achieve the world's first 100% renewables region, a vast area of the globe, that huge blue ocean region, to go totally fossil fuel free, to consign expensive, highly polluting diesel generators to the dustbin of history. COP31 will deliver billions of dollars to the Australian economy through trade deals and tourism, and expose Australian businesses to the world. But we haven't secured the bid yet. It's time for the Prime Minister and Foreign Minister to throw everything at it, and our industry stands ready to help. Friends, we're in a diplomatic and economic race for our lives, a global race to real zero. In the 1990s and 2000s, Australia lost an enormous opportunity. We didn't capitalise on that intellectual development in UNSW, ANU, James Cook University, CSIRO. We didn't capitalise on the value of that for our nation. Well, let's not make the same mistake again. Australia's entire economic future is at stake, the future of our planet. Thank you very much.
John, thank you so much, John. We will move on to, questions from colleagues in a moment. There's a lot to think about there. Working in from the back end of your address, you've received a little bit of applause here in making the call for a 2035 target somewhere in the high 70% range to keep up with Europe and the rest of the world. Yet, in view of Trump's United States, the general perception is that the global race is, if anything, slowing down. Why would Australia be acting proportionally with the rest of the world if it went for such a high figure in the high 70s?
The global transfer of wealth, the $10 trillion US a year that's spent on coal, gas, oil, petrol, diesel around the world, that is transitioning. The world is in the process of electrifying everything that can be electrified. Transportation, gas industries in industry, renewable energy and more. And that is really significant because, and why are they doing that? They're not doing it because there is a UN mandate or a charter. They're doing it because it saves them money. It's actually the cheapest thing to do. And so there is a race underway. Countries that lean into this and secure the advantage win disproportionately economically. And that is Australia's challenge. And if you set the signal and we unite behind this as a nation, it's possible. I'll tell you one other thing I see when I go to China. One thing you can say about the Chinese system is that China plays as a team. And Australia spends all of our time trying to tear each other apart. That is no way to compete for Team Australia, to think about our collective national wealth, our natural resources, and our intellectual capacity. And that's why it's so important that Australia does lean in, because this is the trade and investment and business opportunity of a lifetime.
Is it going to make the 2030 target, Australia, 43%?
I think we're completely on track. And I'll tell you the thing that's really accelerated things, the home battery rebate program. It's been extraordinary. We know that there'll be more than 6 gigawatt hours in distributed battery storage turned on in the grid in the blink of an eye. And that's because we've got tradies all across the country, in every town and city, doing the transition every single day. That's a national asset, which is going to benefit the entire nation and the entire grid. Just one other thing to add to that, Greg. We also did some numbers around this, and we found, because we take energy from the middle of the day, energy's worth nothing in the middle of the day in Australia. We've got so much solar pouring into the system, and we shift it to nighttime. Now, energy is really expensive at night. And so we take the cheapest energy. That then means that we're reducing demand at nighttime. Now, that actually pushes down electricity prices for everybody, not just for the people who have solar. We ran the numbers.
What are those numbers?
$19 billion saved for every Australian on the energy system out to the life of the scheme, 2030. That is a massive saving, whether you've got solar or batteries or not.
All right. Why don't we go to the colleagues now? Plenty more I could ask, by the way, John, but let's go to Tess Economy from AAP.
Thank you very much for your time today. And I just wanted to touch on the cheaper home batteries program. Do you believe the discount goes far enough? And do you think it should be extended to renters, or that it could be as well?
So the good news is that many people don't need a very big battery to time shift. If you're a single person or a retired couple, you might only need 6 or 7 kilowatt hours at night time to get you through the night. We ran the numbers. We actually ran through a simulation of about 3 million profiles on the grid. And we found that the average size, if you just want to time shift energy, is about 7 or 8 kilowatt hours. Now, there's always some big households that use much more, right? But and so what that means is that the batteries don't have to actually be all that big. And the cost of those batteries, before the subsidy, you could get a 5 kilowatt hour battery for $4,000. After the subsidy, less than $3,000. So it means, I think there is a massive saving for all Australians. That does not mean that we shouldn't have other programs to help people who are really on the bones of their backside, right? Who really need the help. We should totally do that.
And would that battery capacity be sufficient to overcome very recent experiences? In fact, on the 1st of July, you probably read the daily assessments, John. It was a C day, cold, calm and cloudy. The coal plants in New South Wales were cranking at almost record level, full capacity, 7,000 megawatts out of a total of 8,000 megawatt capacity for the whole week. Now, in time, they will be switched off or broken. On the numbers you present, can batteries fill that gap?
Batteries and energy storage is the absolutely critical missing piece on our energy network. And so it's big batteries, it's small batteries, it's pumped hydro, it's Snowy 2.0, right? That energy storage is absolutely critical in the Australian system, not just here, but around the world. The quicker and faster we embrace the energy storage solution, the more secure, available and cheap our energy network will be.
All right. Ruben Spargo from Sky News.
Thank you, John. Your organisation is a registered charity. It's previously donated to Labor. It's taken a strong opposition against the coalition's nuclear policy. Given this level of political engagement, is it appropriate for the council to retain its charitable status?
Great question, Ruben. Thank you. Yes, the Smart Energy Council has donated to the Labor Party for two consecutive years. Actually, it's actually not a donation. We're part of something called the Labor Business Forum, along with literally hundreds of other peak industry bodies, people like the Minerals Council. Now, technically, that is a membership fee. It's not a donation, and it is not disclosable. However, as an organisation, we've chosen to disclose that to be on the AEC Transparency Register to actually demonstrate our commitment to openness and transparency. It's also worth noting that in the past, we've donated money to the New South Wales Liberal Party. When it comes to our charity status, we are abided by the rules of the ACNC. They're the federal government agency that controls this sector. Now, the Smart Energy Council always abides by those laws and all other applicable laws, and we always will.
Julie Hare from the Australian Financial Review.
Thank you very much for your speech. You said during your speech that we can't have an energy transition without innovation, but we know that Australian expenditure on research and development is pretty well at an all-time low. It's just 1.66% of GDP and has effectively halved since 2008. I've just come from an event at the Academy of Science talking about Horizon Europe, which is this massive global research fund. I'm sure you're aware of it. And Australia, for reasons we don't quite know, has always refused to sign on to it. As we speak, Japan, Singapore, South Korea, sorry. Well, that was a faux pas. Are all in the process of signing on. They're here, they're negotiating with the government to see if Australia will. The things that they were talking about this morning, that signing on to that fund can help Australian researchers, is not just in money, but in that kind of collaboration and enormous talent in areas such as green metals, which you already mentioned, low carbon liquid fuels, and green energy manufacturing. I'm just wondering if you could talk to me about the importance of maybe Australia joining that fund, just given the instability in the US, which is another research partner, and the data that shows that China is the absolute leader by a stratosphere in all of these areas.
Great question. So I think the collective wealth that we hold in our hands, the diamonds, so to speak, is the intellectual capacity of our people, unrivaled. And the history back to 1954. But we are not serious about it. We don't strategically invest in it. We don't have a framework of growing it and exploiting it. I spent a bit of time in China and recently met with, I've been a couple of times, to CATL. They're the world's largest lithium-ion battery manufacturer. Do you know, they have, in their research and development area, 21,000 engineers, 2,500 PhDs. They spend, one company, $2.5 billion a year on research and development. That's why they're producing batteries now for cars that have a range of 1,100 kilometres, that can charge from 0 to 520 kilometres in 5 minutes. And that's just increasing from here. We have an untapped national wealth. It is a tragedy that as a nation we do not focus on it, exploit it, and rally behind this, both economically and politically, to actually capitalise on Australia's competitive advantage.
Okay, thank you.
Corrie McLeod, Innovation Oz.
Thank you very much for your address. I just wanted to touch on, well, firstly, recapping your address. There is a moment in time, there is ambition, there is, a resounding win of the Labor government. With that moment in time, you also referenced the National Reconstruction Fund, which of course is an opportunity to be flowing some of these investments into unlocking the opportunity that sits before us. It is quite a low amount that you mentioned. What would you like to see in terms of fast-tracking that investment? What would be the ideal scenario to see us unlocking some of that money towards some of the ambition you've referenced?
Spend the money. And it's not just that fund. There's $1 billion for solar manufacturing in Australia, $500 million for battery manufacturing in Australia. Spend the money. We know what the answer is. Industry knows. Research knows. We don't need to go through 57 review processes. We do need to act. And that's somewhere where I think as a nation we really are poor. We need to commit to something, be well informed, hit the right target, but then go for it. And puddling around at the edges doesn't serve us at all.
Thank you.
You mentioned, John, in your address, the blockages that are occurring in rewiring the nation, major transmission and distribution builds in this country. And, you mentioned planning, reform and environmental considerations. Can you elaborate on what is exactly needed there? Do we need greater veto and override powers by governments to do away with objections from landholders?
What's happening in rural and regional Australia is that social licence is being weaponised to stop the transition. We have companies in New South Wales where they receive objections for their project to proceed. Now, in New South Wales, if you get 50 objections, it automatically triggers a review process, right? It slows the whole thing down. Well, recently we had a company and they received 51 objections. 3 of them were from locals. The rest were from people who could put their name to an objection, right? You get the same 47 people every time, right? Just a piece of cake. We also know that the coalition is telling us a lie when they say that Australians don't back the transition in our regions. Polling consistently shows 16, 17% of Australians are against the transition. And Greg, some of them have valid concerns, right, that we should absolutely take seriously. But on average, around 66% of people in rural and regional Australia, they want the jobs. They want the investment. They want the uplift in productivity and living standards. They're all in on the transition. So I think we saw it in the election. Barnaby Joyce and others standing on the shore, commanding offshore wind not to come in. How did that go? Well, it didn't go well because it is out of step with what Australians want and what we expect.
Come to you in a moment. Final investment decisions are faltering, though, aren't they? Particularly in offshore wind, but not only offshore wind. Some investors just aren't putting their money where their mouth is at crunch time. We're seeing that presently.
There has been an enormous cost to our nation from the climate wars. Now, the climate wars are a bit like, imagine Vladimir Zelensky, right? The war in Ukraine rages not because of Ukraine, but because of Putin in Russia. The climate wars do not persist because of the Greens, the Teal Independents, the Labor and the Australian community. They persist because the coalition makes it the point of ideological difference and attack. And so this attack, this absolute clogging up of our national debate is actually costing us real money, costing us jobs and investment, costing us opportunity. And so that cost is profound. Yes, so it does mean that investors are put off, right? That's the whole point of slowing down the transition.
Right, but by that logic, they would start investing now, wouldn't they, given the certainty of the election outcome?
And many of them are. And the great news is that we now sit in a unique window. We've not been in this position before. A federal government that embraces the change in place for 3, probably 6 years, right? And so that actually does provide some time and some certainty to invest, and that's what we absolutely hope happens.
All right, next question from Michael De Percy from The Spectator.
Thanks, Greg. Michael De Percy, The Spectator Australia. An hour north of here in the Upper Lachlan, there are wind turbines in every direction as far as the eye can see. Yet our power bills have gone up over the last 4 years, 40%. So my question is, why should residents of the Upper Lachlan trust what you've had to say today? And also, when will it actually get cheaper? We're hearing it's free, but it's costing us a lot of money.
It takes me back. Do you remember? Was it Joe Hockey? Driving past the wind turbines on the way to Canberra. The blight on the landscape. There was a period where we had these were creating acoustic brain cancer in people, right? It was a phase that we went through in this country. That's not to say that there are people in regional and rural Australia that don't have genuine concerns, and they're right to hold them. But I would say this. We do need to get better in engaging in these nation-building projects. One thing that I'm advocating for amongst our membership is to bring forward projects that do more community benefit sharing. That actually means if we're producing the cheapest power and that community is hosting it, why can't we have a mechanism that actually gives people in that community 5 cents off their retail rate for their energy, for example, right? There are things that we could do to spread the load. So it's not just covered by one community, but it's actually covered by the whole nation.
Thank you.
Nick Stewart from Ability.
G'day. Before the election, you talked about the trifecta: no nuclear power, reductions in gas, reductions in and moving towards no coal. Now, however, I can't imagine that you've actually spoken through the whole speech, and you're talking about the climate wars being over, and yet it seems as if the laggard is in fact the current government, because we're seeing a tale of two Australias. We're seeing a situation where the eastern states are being genuinely decarbonising, whereas on the other hand, over in the western states, in WA and the Northern Territory, you've got completely different, a go-ahead version for carbon-intensive industries. How can you manage to get through an entire speech without once criticising the Labor government?
Well, I'll tell you, actually, I did criticise the Labor government. I talked about it.
Oh, I must have missed it. Sorry, I might have fallen asleep that moment.
Okay, well, that's fabulous. So, you know, I think for us, well, let's look at Western Australia. You talk about Western Australia. In Western Australia recently, there was an election, and actually the people of Fremantle actually gave federal Labor a shock, right? Because they actually want to see greater action in that state. Many people do. I think your comments, actually in my mind, took me back to that scene of Trump and Zelensky in the White House, right? In the Oval Office, right? And really what you're saying is that we should be berating Zelensky, right? We should be berating those people who have stood up for and advanced the agenda.
I feel more like Zelensky being berated by Trump.
Well, and I say that I completely disagree.
So what are you going to demand? I mean, you've said 75% by 2035. Why not 50% by 2030?
Well, look, you might have been asleep during the speech, but I think everyone else in the room was wide awake. I talked in detail about the things that federal Labor and other governments need to do. Things like speeding up the approvals, spending the money. We've just talked about it in detail. So I'm not entirely sure of the speech that you were in, but it wasn't my speech.
So you're quite happy not to have any targets at all?
That's not what I talked about. I talked about a target in the high 70%.
When
we also talked about a target of, will we make 82% renewables by 2030? And I answered that in detail.
And so otherwise a green pass for Labor?
Well, Greg, are we going to let this roll on and on? You know, it's a question for you, I think.
Not forever, but I think he's entitled to challenge and prosecute.
There are no green passes for anybody, right? We are going to hold everyone to account. That's our role.
In establishing or settling on a rough figure for 2035 in the high 70s, have you crunched the financials behind that, the system-wide costs or public sector contribution that goes with it?
It's a great question. And our challenge in Australia is to do two things. Electrify everything that can be electrified. Power that with renewable energy. And those things that can't be electrified, those hard-to-abate sectors, use things like renewable hydrogen. You know, renewable hydrogen is the basis of the iron processing plan that I talked about. It's the basis. You take renewable hydrogen, you add nitrogen from the atmosphere, and you get renewable ammonia. Ammonia is the basis of fertiliser. Today, we feed the world by using fossil gas and turning it into ammonia. And we can't not feed the world, right? So we've got to take that and turn it into zero carbon fertiliser. Wouldn't that be a nation building a global leading plan for Australia to partner with economies like India or Brazil to do exactly that?
Next question from Chris Wallace of the University of Canberra.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Fascinating figures in your presentation. I wonder if you could give us a sense of, you know, where we're at right now in terms of rooftop solar versus large-scale solar and wind farms in terms of contribution to energy production in Australia, and also what the trend is in that. The reason I'm asking is I'm wondering whether, in fact, the climate wars can be obviated by just heavily going down the rooftop route. And a second question, if I may, tertiary education has come up at a number of points in your speech and in the questions. How big a blockage is it that the government seems to be taking a very incremental approach on both higher education and TAFE level education in terms of pumping out the engineers, the technicians, the tradies we need for this not to be a blockage in the transition?
Great questions. Thank you, Chris. I think on the first question about the rooftop revolution, actually what we're doing in Australia is unique in the world. This is a bottom-up, community-led, individual person investment that's happening. And it's interesting when you look at the demographics, most people that are doing this, they're not Labor voters, not Green voters. They're doing this because they're worried, they're self-funded retirees, they've got a limited amount of money, they don't know how long they're going to live for, and power bills just keep going up and up. So if they can lock in their power and know that that's a bill, get rid of their power bill, their gas bill, and their petrol bill with an EV in the garage, that's a massive saving. Could be over $5,000 a year for someone. That is peace of mind for Australians. So the thing is that when you attack our industry, you're attacking the 10 million Australians that have solar and the 10 million more that love to get solar at their place. So it's a really dumb strategy. Today, Chris, that rooftop sector is making up a growing part. It's roughly, in terms of total capacity, almost 50-50, right? The householders of Australia lift an enormous load. And guess what? We can and should do more. Because when we help people transition at home to electrify, to get solar, a battery, a heat pump, induction cooktop, what we do is that we slash cost of living. Real bill relief, not for a quarter, but for the next 20 years, right? That is about powering, and that money then doesn't go to the big power companies and to overseas interests. It stays in local communities. It's spent in the local butchers or the flower shop, right? It's getting a tradie around to fix something at home. This is really important transformation. I think the home battery program, we're going to look back in history on that and say that was transformational, because we're going to show the world a uniquely Australian way to transition. When it comes to skills and jobs, we do have constraints. You know, our skills and our people resources, that's a genuine constraint. That's why we'd advocate that we need to partner with other countries, partner with people like India. India want to have technology with very high voltage transmission lines, much more advanced than Australia. Now, how about if we actually get them to come and provide some training to our transmission engineers here? How do we upskill that population and get the transition moving? At the trade level, the government's done extremely well. They've provided a lot of support to electricians and other tradies, you know, in our industry. But here's a national shame. Only 2% of tradies in our sector are female. That is unacceptable. That's why the Smart Energy Council has a gender action plan. We can't transition without using all of the human resources and capital of our country, and we need to do better.
Thank you.
Just following up on Chris's question, John, about rooftop solar, an expanding feature is two-way pricing in Australia, where in some circumstances, it's been widely reported, households are actually losing money at certain times of the day for pumping electricity back into the grid. It's meant to compensate for the network costs of handling all this sporadic generation. What should happen with that? Is your organisation comfortable with two-way pricing?
Well, you know, we've got two issues at play. One is if you're a big power company and you invest in the network, you get a guaranteed rate of return, right? It doesn't matter. If you can gold plate, if you can put an argument up to spend, you get your money back plus more. When householders make an investment into the system, they get nothing. And so actually, that's why I say we're going to put people at the centre of our power system, not the big power companies. And we're going to use technology to do better. Use the virtual power plant technology to orchestrate those distributed home batteries, to help people capitalise on selling into the grid, making money and providing support when the grid needs it. That's the sort of smart transition that we need.
All right. We've got another question from Julie Hare.
Thank you. So you mentioned in your speech that you recognise that Australia hasn't yet secured COP31. What would you like from the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister? Should Anthony Albanese fly to Turkey and speak directly to Erdogan? And are you concerned at the lack of urgency on the PM's behalf?
Yeah, look, when Matthias Cormann was going to be on the OECD, do you remember that?
Yeah.
The government gave him a jet to fly around the world for a year, right? When Australia goes in, Paul Keating and Anita Keating flying to secure the Olympics before the 2000, right? This is actually, Australia is at its best when as a middle power, we're out advocating on the global stage for something that is of the community and global benefit and interest. And so for us, it's time for And not just the government. Actually, we all need to pile in support. I'm hearing and reading stories in the newspapers that this is a giant waste of time, right? That we shouldn't be doing this. Actually, this is the giant business opportunity. We absolutely should be doing this. So it actually takes all of us swinging in behind this, but the government really, really needs to do whatever it can, because this is a big dividend for Australia.
Thank you.
I might have to fact check the Corman jet for a year claim.
Oh, well,
John.
you know,
Not sure it was, but
yeah.
anyway.
Hey, is there still the ABC fact-checking unit around?
We'll send it off to them. Thank you. I think we've got time for one more question.
Right.
Corrie McLeod is back.
Thank you very much. There's a lot of money and investment flowing into data centres and digital infrastructure that will be core to sort of powering, the next generation of business in the country. Obviously, there are huge demands from an energy consumption perspective, as well as our natural resources, water. How do you reconcile where we're at now in terms of planning for a renewable energy future and what the demands will be in the future?
I think it's a great question. The two mega trends globally, AI is going to change the world. The energy transition is going to change the world. And Australia actually could benefit from both. The Sun Cable project has a vision to put power under an undersea cable to Singapore. Singapore's business plan be the green data centre of the world. Well, actually, why don't we skip the cable and actually make the green data centres here? And so what we could do is we could actually build enormously power hungry AI, chat GPT, big servers that are actually going to, if we don't get this right, not just push up energy prices, but be a carbon bomb that destroys the world. Why wouldn't we build those data centres where energy is the cheapest to produce? Where we actually tap into Australian sunshine and wind, energy storage, to actually attract that investment in our country, geographically secure, advanced economy. You could put it in a whole bunch of places around the country, close to those great renewables resources. That's the sort of nation-building vision that we absolutely should have.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to wrap up questions there. John's made his views abundantly clear. We are in a bit of a holding pattern with Chris Bowen, who you referenced in your address, still to fill out some critical details about the second term agenda, 2035 being only part of it, John. But you've given us some food for thought. We'll thank you, farewell you, and present you with a National Press Club membership. Thanks.
Great.
And thanks to everyone.